if we look at Sharia law in light of this situation. And by looking at Sharia law, we may discover some way of giving a contribution to the process through Islam. There is a different view from Islam than the popular view in the public today. We have to reinterpret our own values as Muslims, and we have to make those relevant to today, but at the same time, they stand in their own right. It's complicated because of one thing. When it comes to democratization, which is one of the foci here, when it comes to democratization, there is a tendency of the highly democratic countries in the world to impose their democracy. And of course, I have argued that vehemently for a long time. In fact, this whole paper excited me because he's very, very smart. He agrees with me. And Gulen starts with the proposition, you cannot use coercion in matters of religion. And he says, I add also that we should not use coercion in matters of politics. That is not the way a democracy properly works. And I think that's an interesting point at which he believes, as a Muslim, that we can begin to talk to each other. Nevertheless, in this situation, where there are great differences, Islam has benefited economically in some quarters more than in others, but it has benefited. Yet, cultural and moral and religious values resist coercion and are not being properly attended because they are not themselves a part of the coercive activity. I think that's an important insight. That was helpful to me. Right path between prohibition and permission has always been an interest of Islam, and we seek to follow that path. Between the potential conflicts between Islam and globalization, the task is to find that balance. But today, there's an added dimension, and that dimension is urgency. Urgency means that we can no longer go off into our exclusive camps without regard to our common task because of the provenance of globalization. Now, there are some things Sharia does not ban outright. There are things that are possibly permissible. In other words, you have to negotiate them in Sharia, he argues. And he says, the presumption of permissibility of using everything that is not banned by the Quran or the Prophet's Sunnah can be applied. In other words, in the guidance of Sharia, there is wiggle room. And he believes it should have that wiggle room. Not everything is established rigidly by law. To get to our basic principles as Muslims, we must return to the idea of the cross-cultural values that we share. But how will we know that? We know that by dialogue. Now, that's already an introduction to Gulen himself. Now, here's what he said we must do, first of all. And I see the Gulen movement having taken this on dramatically, and that is we have to introduce Islam to the West. I think that's the reason I said last night I've been in a steep learning curve, because my abysmal ignorance of Islam was threatening me, and I